Magandang araw, Sir Wilbur po, at your service. Narito ang ETUlay upang gabayan ka sa inyong pag-aaral upang lubos na maunawaan ang iba't ibang paksa o subject. Ang ETUlay ay isang free online tutorial class na pinangungunahan ng DepEd Educational Technology Unit sa pamumuno ni Undersecretary Elaine Del B. Pascua. Ang programang ito ay hindi lamang para sa mga bata, kundi ito rin ay magsisilbing gabay sa mga magulang at mga guro kung paano nila ituturo o gagabayan sa bawat asignatura ang kanilang mga anak o mga estudyante. Sa kasalukuyan, ang self-learning module mula sa rehiyon ng Calabarzon at kilala sa tawag na pivot ang ginagamit sa ating ETUlay online class. Kaya ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Ihanda na ang inyong mga ballpen o lapis, papel o kwaderno at samahan kaming itulay ang pagkatuto para sa bawat batang Pilipino. Sama-sama tayong magtutulungan para malampasan ang mga hamon sa panahong ito. Halina't matuto kasama ang inyong online tutor sa oras na ito.
Alright, so ayan, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat at tayo po ngayon ay nagsisimula na sa ating online tutorial para sa week na ito ng ating Senior High School Practical Research 2. At muli po tayo ay magsasama-sama ng sa loob ng 40 minuto. Okay. Para sa week na ito at sa fourth quarter, ang ating pagtutuunan ng pansin ay ang description of sample para sa week 2 mula sa MELC or ang ating most essential learning competency. At para sa ating objective, na mula rin po sa ating MELC ay tayo po ay inaasahan na ma-describe natin ang sampling procedures and samples. Siyempre, about pa rin po ito sa ating practical research. Ngayon, bago tayo mag-umpisa, balikan muna natin panag-aralan sa pamagitan ng sagot sa mga katanungan or sa participate sa ating first learning task, no? All you have to do is to choose the letter of the correct answer to the following question. So first question, what research design is used to establish an initial understanding and background information about the research study of interest? Is it A, exploratory, B, descriptive, C, causal, or D, evaluation? Sige nga po, try po nating answer ang first question. So all you have to do is to choose the letter of the correct answer to the question. So ang tama pong sagot ay exploratory. Ayan, exploratory po ang tama sagot para sa first question. Muli po tayo ay nagbabalik-aral sa ating pinag-aralan noong nakaraang linggo, first week ng ating quarter 4. So ang number 2, what research design is used to measure the impact that an independent variable or the causing effect has on another variable or the variable that is being affected? Is it A, exploratory, B, descriptive, C, causal, or D, evaluation? What do you think is the correct answer for number 2? The correct answer is letter C. Ayan, letter C ang tamang sagot sa ating number 2 question. Number 3. Number 3. Ayan, wala pa. What research design is often used to gather information on current situations and conditions? What research design is often used to gather information in current situations and conditions? Is it A, exploratory, B, descriptive, C, causal, or D, evaluation? At ang tamang sagot ay letter B. Ayan, letter B ang tamang sagot sa ating question number 3. And for number 4, ayan, for number 4, what descriptive research design is used for research studies aimed to determine the existence of a relationship between two or more variables? Again, what descriptive research design is used for research studies aimed to determine the existence of a relationship between two or more variables? Is it A, formative, B, survey, C, correlational, or D, evaluation? Ang tamang sagot ay, ayan, letter C, correlational. Okay? Correlational po ang tamang sagot sa number 4. Number 5, this is the last question for the first learning task. What descriptive research design is conducted to elicit useful feedback from a variety of respondents from various fields to aid in decision making or policy formulation? Is it A, evaluation, B, correlational, or D, causal? The correct answer for the 5th question is letter A, evaluation. Okay? So, evaluation ang tamang sagot. So, again, sa bilang balik-aral, ang ating pong tinalakay nung nakaraang linggo ay about sa categories of research design. And we said that there are 3 major categories of research design or research designs. These are exploratory, descriptive, and causal. And descriptive has also its types of research design, and these are survey, correlational, and evaluation. Now, for descriptive research design, so ayan no, so tatlo po sila, survey, correlational, at evaluation. Ang evaluation ay meron ding dalawang klase, formative at summative evaluation. And for each type of evaluation, formative and summative research designs, you also have specific types. Like for formative, you have needs assessment, process evaluation, implementation evaluation, and program monitoring. And for summative evaluation, you have secondary and data analysis, impact evaluation, outcome evaluation, and cost effectiveness evaluation. Okay, so yan po ang ating summary sa ating discussion last week about the categories of research design. Now, let's proceed to our topic for this afternoon, and that is about describing sampling procedure and, of course, sample. So, what is a sampling? What is sampling in research? Of course, sampling is a process of getting information from a proper subset of population. And it is also choosing of respondents or subjects from a large population to answer your research questions. or selecting only the part of the whole according to Bobby in 2012. So, sampling is a process or the procedure you use or you follow when choosing or selecting your respondents for your research. Okay, so from your target population or identified population, you will choose your samples or your respondents, and we call it again the process sampling. Okay, now let's proceed to yes, good afternoon, Miss Lovi Taroma. Evangeline Dulantes Amugies, good afternoon po. From North District Division of Davao. Si Ma'am Luvi is from San Mateo National High School, DepEd Isabela. So why do we have to do sampling in our research? No? Bakit kailangan nating mag-sampling sa ating, bakit hindi na lang tayo basta pumili na lang ng gusto natin, kasi narito ay ilan sa mga dahilan. One is when you do sampling, you get information about large populations, you get information about large populations. Well, through sampling, you can get the needed information for your research about the large population, even if it is large. But if you choose your respondents through sampling, you can get the necessary information for your research. Less costs, of course, if you only choose or select a certain number from a very large population, mas konti lang ang cost or gastos para sa research. Less field time, syempre kung kailangan mong pumunta sa lugar ng yung respondents, you will have less time consumed because you have only chosen a certain number of samples or respondents from the large population. And another purpose is when it's impossible to study the whole population. Well, of course, especially if you're talking about thousands and millions, in a population, so it's very impossible to study that number of populations. You have to do sampling. Ayan, good afternoon from SDO Makati, Machis Timber. Yes, good afternoon sa ating ETUlay watchers. Watching from Kirapawan City, Region 12. By the way, Region 12, ang module po ng Region 12 ang ginamit ko para sa aking presentation, Ma'am Alin Angeles, Suksargen Region 12. Ayan. Another reason I want to use the entire population of sample. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na pag sinabing population, hindi mo na siya maaaring magamit sa iyong research as sample. You can still use the entire population. First, when your population is very small, if say you have 100 to 1,000 or less than, pwede sigurong gamitin yung entire population as your sample for your research. When you have extensive resources, kung marami kang pera, marami kang time, pwede naman siguro ang entire population. When you don't expect a very high response, syempre, kung kukonti lang ang respondents mo, konti rin ang response from your population. And that's it. Now, in sampling, here are some related terms. Kanina kanina ko pa to mini-mention, population. It's an aggregate or a set of all units or cases, maybe people, things, events, being studied having at least one common characteristics. Kumbaga, ito yung sinasabi yung kabuuan, no? Kabuuan ng yung sample population. It's a big group of people from where you choose to sample. So, example, total number of Carabaos in Barangay X, all students of KNCHS during the second semester of school year 2020-2021. So, yun po ang population. Ang sample naman, it's a smaller but hopefully representative collection of units from a population used to determine truths about that population, according to Field in 2005. And also, it's a chosen set of people to represent the population. And it's also a randomly selected subgroup of people or objects from the overall membership pool of a defined target population. So, keywords po dito sa ating definition ng sample ay representative or represent, chosen set of people. Okay? So, ito naman yung sinasabing part, no? Part of a whole. So, yung part, ito yung sample, yung whole, yung ating population. Okay, next term, sampling unit. It's a term referring to every individual in the population. So, each respondent or each participant in your population is called a sampling unit. Sample size is the number of respondent subjects that you are going to use in the study, of course. Sample size like the number of your sample. It could be gotten through the use of Sloven's formula. Ayan. So, ang sample size, meron po siyang formula. No, ibig sabihin, pag pumili ka kung ilan ang dapat mong kunin na sample or kung ano ang sample size mo, dumadaan din po yan sa proseso, at yan ay sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng Sloven's formula, at ang Sloven's formula ay n equals n divided by 1 plus ne squared. Alright? So you need to use first the Sloven's formula in getting the sample. So you have here the formula where again n equals n over 1 plus ne squared. So n, the small n, is the sample. The big N or the capital N is the total population, and the E is the margin of error preferred, then squared, no? E squared. Now, example, find the sample size required for population size of 1,000 if an error of 0.05 is tolerated. So, using the formula, you have the given population 1,000 and the margin of error is 5% or 0.05. Okay? So, you have substitute the values. So, you will get 28. Okay? 28 ang sample size mo from the given population size of 1,000. So, from the total 1,000 na population, no, kukuha ka lang ng 28, no? If you have an error of or margin of error of 5%. Alright? So, after obtaining the size of the sample, you may now determine the sampling techniques to be employed, no? So, before you decide on what sampling technique to use or what's the appropriate sampling technique, you have first to identify the sample size using the Sloven's formula. Huh? Do not forget that, researchers, student researchers. Alright, next. Now, there are factors affecting the sample selection, affecting sample selection. One is sample size, like how big should the sample be? It should be on others' previous study on how they got their sample and ensure the representativeness or accuracy of sample size. So, how big should the sample be? Depende po yan sa, again, sa population. Okay? So, kung let's say, kanina sa example, you have 1,000 and then 28 yung lumabas, then medyo hindi ka pa kontento sa number na yon, you try to siguro expand your population, no? Choose a different group for your population, or you can also look at the previous study about the topic, no? And on how they got their sample. And also, it's important that you ensure the representativeness or accuracy of sample size. Also, sampling technique affects the sample selection. And when we talk about sampling technique, there are two types: the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling, which we will discuss later, after this slide. Bias is one of the causes of sampling errors because take note, the sampling procedure must be accurate. Bakit ano tong bias na to sa sampling? Kasi minsan para maging madali yung ibang researchers, no? Hindi na sila gumagamit ng sampling technique, no? Kumbaga for their convenience na lang siguro, yun. Sila na lang yung pumipili ng kanilang sampling team, which may lead to sampling errors and inaccuracy of the results. Kasi sa sampling pa lang may problema na, inaccurate na, hindi na tama yung pagpili. Okay? So here are the sampling techniques or procedures. Again, you have two types: probability and non-probability. Probability has there are 5 probability sampling techniques, no? Simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, and multistage sampling. Non-probability, on the other hand, has 4 types: convenience sampling, snowball sampling, purposive sampling, and quota sampling. Medyo maliit siguro ang font ng ating slide, but later we will discuss each one, no? So first, another factor is his heterogeneity of population, meaning heterogeneous population means individuals with varied abilities. And statistical techniques will also affect the sample selection. Like accuracy of sample depends on how precise or accurate your methods are in calculating the numbers used in measuring the chosen samples or giving a certain value to each of them. So sa pagpili pa lang ng sample size, gumagamit na tayo ng statistics, no? Then as we go on with our research, no, our sample will also be treated with different statistical techniques, no, for us to be able to get certain value or information about the sample, the selected sample. Of course, time and cost also affect sample selection. You have to consider the amount of money and the time and of course the effort in choosing your sample. Now let's discuss the first type of sampling technique or probability sampling technique or procedure, which is probability sampling. So what is probability sampling? It means that each member of the defined population has an equal chance of being selected, no? Equal chance of being selected. It gives the researcher the opportunity to assess the sampling error, and probability sampling enables investigators to specify the size of the sample that they will need if they want to obtain degree of certainty that the sample size would definitely represent the whole, and usually used in descriptive research. Alright, so speaking of descriptive research, di ba, nung last week we talked about the different categories of research design. So for example, you have decided to use descriptive research, no, design, then probability sampling is the procedure or technique, sampling technique that is appropriate for your research. Alright, so again, probability sampling is usually used in descriptive research. What the first probability sampling is simple random sampling. This is the most basic and commonly used sampling technique, again, in descriptive research. And it can be done through lottery or fishbowl method, and also with the use of the table of random numbers. So para lang to siyang raffle draw or lottery, lotto, no? Yung mga tumataya sa lotto, no? O di kaya may paraffle, no? May paraffle, let's say, or sa classroom nyo merong anong tawag nito? Recitation, oral recitation, and then your names are put in a fishbowl or any container. Tapos pipili si ma'am o sir ng pangalan na siyang sasagot para sa oral recitation. So it's an example of a simple random sampling. So what's the procedure obtaining sample using lottery or fishbowl technique? Fishbowl technique ang tawag sa simple random sampling or lottery. Compute the sample size. First, compute the sample size. Then, determine where you will get your sample. Again, compute the sample size using the Sloven's formula. And then, determine where you will get your sample. Of course, beforehand, alam mo na kung saan ka kukuha lang sample. Determine the technique in selecting your respondents. Make a listing or assign numbers to each of the total population. Put them in a container or box, then draw the sample, and after drawing the sample, refer to your listing and determine the actual names of the respondents. Instead, the names of respondents ang ilalagay sa fishbowl or sa whatever na lalagyan, no, numbers para again walang bias, no. Numbers, parang yun parang sa raffle din, no. And then after you get the certain amount or the specified number of sample size, then you go to your list and then tingnan nyo kung sino yung mga nasa number na yon, no? Yun ang very simple procedure for our simple random sampling. Next, systematic random sampling consists of the selection of each nth term from a list. So, meron ka ring list, and you need to obtain first the sample size using the Sloven's formula, and the sample size is the basis for computation of starting number. Let's say, for example, you have a total population of 15,000, and then your sample size is 390. So the computation for the nth is n over the the n, which is the population, over the n, which is the sample. So you have 15,345 divided by 390. That would be 39.34, or 39 is the distance. Therefore, respondents are numbers 39, no, numbers 78, number 117, 156, 195, etc. Until you have taken the total computed sample size of 390. No, systematic random sampling, nth term from a list. So every 39 respondent, no, or distance from 39, next count again 39, so 78, so number 78, that will be your second respondent, and then 117, and so on and so forth, hanggang makakuha ka ng 390 na respondents. Alright? Here's an example, or another version of selecting respondents using the systematic random sampling is writing numbers 1 to 10 on a piece of paper. Put it in a container and pick a number. The number that will pick will be the starting number and the interval to be used in the selection of respondents. No? Instead na gumamit ka ng formula, so numbers na lang. So 1 to 10 for example. So let's say number 9 na napili mo. So 9, let's say number 9 na respondents sa lista, first respondent. Then count ka na naman ng 9, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. No, that will be your second respondent or sample. Alright, so the third probability sampling is stratified random sampling. It is used by making subdivisions of the total population into smaller groups to represent the sample of the study, sometimes called proportional random sampling. Stratified from the word strata, or groups, no, in the population. This type of sampling assures adequate cases for subgroup analysis. And when we say stratum is a subset of the population that share at least one common characteristic, such as males and females. Let's say in a class, no, one stratum is male, another stratum is female. So, for example, pwede rin sigurong age, pwedeng age, no? Pwede rin sigurong depende kung anong gusto nyong groupings, no, ang gamitin niyo para sa isang population. Okay, stratified random sampling. Here's an example of stratified random sampling. The data here are not real. These are mock data. Okay, so for example, you have hospitals in Region 12 in Sarangani, General Santos, Coronadal City, South Cotabato, Tacurong City, Sultan Kudarat, Cotabato Province. You have the number of hospitals in each what you call the locality or place, and then percentage on the third column and the number of samples to be drawn. So how do you get the percentage? 10 divided by 86, which is the total number of hospitals in Region 12, times 100. So 10, which is the number of hospitals in Sarangani, for example. So you have 12%. Okay? So 12%. So 10 times 12%. So the number of samples to be drawn in Sarangani will be 1. Isa lang kukunin mong hospital sa Sarangani out of 10. So for General Santos, you will get 3 hospitals out of 15. Coronadal City, 1 out of 10. 2 in South Cotabato out of 12. 1 for each in Tacurong, Sultan Kudarat, Cotabato City, and Cotabato Province. Excuse me. So all in all, you'll get 11 sample size, or your sample size is 11. So out of 86 hospitals in region 12, you only get or use 11 hospitals as sample for your research study. So yan ang tinatawag nating stratified random sampling. Here's another one. Another example. So this same places in region 12, number of hospitals, and on the third column, 50% samples withdrawn in each place. So you decided to get 50%. So of course, 50% of 10 is 5. 15, 7.5, but just make it 8. Excuse me. And then 5 in Coronadal City out of 10, 6 out of 12 in South Cotabato, and 5 for Tacurong City, Sultan Kudarat, Cotabato City, and 6 for Cotabato Province. So i-round off na lang ang number ang Cotabato Province. So out of 86, you'll get 45 hospitals, no, for your sample. Excuse me. All right, then do the SRS in every stratum or group in getting the representative hospital of every place identified in region 12. Wait lang ha. Okay, next. The fourth probability sampling is cluster sampling, which is selecting respondents in clusters rather than in separate individuals, such as choosing 5 classes of 40 classes each from a whole population of 5,000 students. So the population is divided into clusters of homogeneous units, usually based on geographical contiguity. And cluster means a group of sampling units close to each other that is crowding together in the same area or neighborhood. So for example, you have this map of a let's say a village or barangay, no? So kukuha ka ng cluster mo sila, and then kukuha ka ng respondents from each cluster, no? From each cluster. Or section. So they should be closely they should be crowding together, or anong tawag ito? Malapit sila sa nasa isang lugar sila, kumbaga hindi sila magkakalayo. And then we have the fifth probability sampling, which is the multistage sampling, which divides large populations into stages to make the sampling process more practical. It's a combination of stratified sampling or cluster sampling and simple random sampling is usually used. Ayan, may example tayo dito, no? For example, Philippine school children. When you say Philippine school children, lahat ng mag-aaral sa elementary ng sa buong bansa, sa buong Pilipinas, no? So that's very impossible, no? Na lahat sila ay magiging respondents ng iyong research. So instead, you divide the populations into regions. Siyempre meron na tayong regions, and take a random sample of regions. And the next stage, you might take a simple random sample of schools from within those regions. Finally, you could perform simple random sampling on the students within, kumbaga, from a very large population mula sa napakalaking number, paunti na paunti, pababa ka ng pababa hanggang makuha mo na yung desired number of sample size. Okay? So kaya siya tinawag na multi-stage kasi maraming probability sampling ang ginamit or pinagdaanan bago nakuha yung sample. Like for example, taking the NAT, no? Taking the NAT. Sometimes hindi lahat ng schools, hindi lahat ng estudyante nagte-take ang NAT. Meron lang pili, no? Meron lang pinili. Like nung ano bang yung PISA na exam, international assessment, hindi lahat nag-take nun, no? So, dumaan ng multi-stage sampling ang sample, no? Kung paano nakuha or na-determine kung sino, kung saan ang kukuha ng exam, no? So, multi-stage sampling ang tawag natin doon. Next. Here are some real-life examples of multi-stage sampling. Well, these are not in our country, but Census Bureau in the US. Of course, we have our own census here. Probably multi-stage sampling din ginagamit nila kapag meron silang mga survey, no? National survey. Gallup poll also uses multi-stage sampling. Johnston's et al. Survey on drug use. So these are examples that use multi-stage sampling. Statistics, Bureau of Statistics. Sa atin, NSO or PSA na ngayon. Okay. Aside from probability sampling, no, which is more commonly used, no, and is more preferred by researchers, especially those who are really doing the basic research and other higher researches. Those who are beginners, like students, or those who are not really into, the big type of research, can use non-probability sampling. Pwede rin naman siya, gamitin. Basta tama lang ang pagkakagamit. Like convenience sampling, it's a method of selecting samples that are available and are capable of participating in a research study on a current issue. Sometimes ginagawa ito ng mga estudyante, lalo na kung kulang na sila sa time, or ngayong panahon na mahirap pumili ng sample dahil nga sa restrictions. You cannot go out just like that, hindi ka basta pwedeng lumabas, no? So, maaring convenience sampling ang gamitin mo. It's also called a hazard or availability method, kasi nga kung sino na available, no, na pwedeng maging respondent. Siyempre, you also have to think na bakit mo siya pinili, no? Karapat-dapat ba siyang maging respondent sa iyong research, no? Meron ba siya yung characteristic na hinahanap mo para sa research mo, no? Another non-probability sampling is snowball sampling, which is a technique where the researcher identifies a key informant about the research of interest and then ask the respondent to refer or identify another researcher who can participate in the study. Snowball sampling, para siyang anong tawag nito? Pyramiding. Kumbaga, meron kang i-refer na tao para maging part ng research sample mo, ano? So snowball sampling, it's a technique applicable when researchers find difficulty in locating specific numbers of population. Like for example, your respondents are, I'm talking about snowball technique, no, or sampling. Your respondents are, for example, or your research is about indigenous people. So medyo mahirap, 'di ba, kung pupunta ka sa lugar. So kung meron kang kilalang isa, maaari mo siyang tanungin kung meron ba siyang mga kilala pang mga katulad niya, no? Ganun. Or any type of ano tawag dito? Respondents na medyo mahirap hanapin para sa research. And then you have purposive sampling, sometimes called judgmental or subjective sampling, which employs a procedure in which samples are chosen for a special purpose. It may involve limited numbers of a limited group of population. So, purposive, kung baka meron kang special purpose, kung baka pinili mo sila dahil alam mo na makakatulong sila sa research mo. Hindi na sila kailangan hindi na sila kailangan tumaan sa pagpili sa pamamagitan ng probability sampling. Kumbaga, you have a special purpose in choosing them. And then, quota sampling is gathering a representative sample from a group based on certain characteristics of the population chosen by the researcher. Usually, the population is divided into a specific group. Quota sampling is different from stratified, ha? Stratified sampling kasi parehas din itong groupings, no? Pumipili ka ng group from population. Pagkakaiba nito is, of course, ang quota sampling is hindi dumadaan ng probability sampling, meaning walang equal chance of being chosen. Kumbaga, ikaw lang there's subjectivity, no? Merong subjectivity sa quota sampling. Whereas sa stratified, objective talaga, no, ang pagpili. Pareha sila groupings. So again, to recap our discussion for today, was all about the types of sampling techniques. Again, you have the two types, major types, probability and non-probability. And there are 5 probability sampling techniques. You have simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, and multistage sampling. There are 4 non-probability sampling procedures, which are namely convenience sampling, snowball sampling, purposive sampling, and quota sampling. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, our types of sampling techniques. Sige, malapit na tayong matapos. Sige nga, let's try this one. Determine the sample size using Slovin's formula of the following sample research context. Context lang kasi isa lang ang ginamit ko for this activity. Suppose you plan to conduct a study among 1,500 grade 11 students enrolled in the STEM track. How many respondents are needed using a margin of 2%? Sige nga. Paano natin ito sasagutin? So you have population of 1,500. You have a margin of 2%. And you have the Slovin's formula. So substitute the formula with the given values. And solve. And you have 938. Meron ba nakakuha ng tama? Ayan, so 938. So meaning, out of 1,500, 938 ang pipiliin mong respondents para sa iyong research study. So 938 is your sample size. And what have you learned so far? So what have you realized about sampling in research? And for our first assessment, let's try to answer this activity. Just choose the letter, the correct answer, to complete the statement. Number 1. Sampling is about blank, a sample from a population. Is it A, adding, B, including, C, predicting, or D, selecting? So sampling is about blank, a sample from a population. A, adding a sample, B, including a sample, C, predicting a sample, or D, selecting a sample. Anybody who'd like to answer from our Facebook live watchers or from YouTube? So our answer here is letter D. Sampling is about selecting a sample from a population. And number 2, the probability sampling, which applies the referral type of identifying members of the sampling, is blank sampling, convenience sampling, snowball sampling, purposive sampling, or quota sampling. We have the answer is letter B, snowball sampling. And number 3, what is true about stratified sampling? A, is it a type of sampling method in which the total population is divided into smaller groups or strata? The population is divided into various subgroups. C, it is part of sampling, or D, all of the above. Correct answer is D, all of the above. Number 4, it is the most basic and commonly used sampling technique in descriptive research. Simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, or multi-stage sampling. The correct answer is simple random sampling. And number 5, it consists of the selection of each nth term from a list of population. Same choices: simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, or multi-stage sampling. And our answer is letter B. And for your final assessment, which will be related or an application of what we have discussed, application in your research 2, practical research 2, at malapit na ang inyong final paper. What you're going to do is to choose and identify the sample and the appropriate sampling procedure of your own research project for practical research. So by now, I think na you have already decided on what research design. So let's say descriptive research design and appealing you, then you will be you'll choose from among the 5 or the probability sampling techniques. All right, and of course choose first your sample size using Sloven's formula, and then your sampling procedure based on your topic, and of course your research questions or research problem. And with that, here are my references before I end our discussion or session today. So again, I used the SLM Quarter 2 Module 2 of Region 12, DepEd Region 12. No? And also the book by Prieto, Naval, and Carey, Practical Research 2 for Senior High School. And with that, I say thank you. Maraming salamat. Damo nga salamat. Dagang salamat. And good afternoon once again. See you next week for our Week 3 session. Same time, same channel, same FB. Up next, si Tutor Reverie for Statistic and Probability.
Sigurado ako na marami ka na namang natutuhan sa ating ETUlay tutorial session ngayong araw. Tandaan, ito ay hindi lamang para sa ating mga mag-aaral, kundi pati rin sa ating mga minamahal na guro at mga magulang na kaagapay natin para maituloy ang pagkatuto sa kabila ng nararanasang pandemya. Patuloy ding sumubaybay sa DepEd TV para sa mga araling ginawang video episodes. Mapapanood ito mula Lunes hanggang Sabado, alas 7 ng umaga hanggang alas 7 ng gabi sa inyong mga telebisyon. Abangan sa Lunes mula 1:00 ng tanghali ang iba pang aralin sa ating ETUlay free online tutorial session sa Science. I-like and subscribe at manatiling nakasubaybay sa ating ETUlay tutorial session sa DepEd Edtech Unit FB page at Educational Technology Unit channel sa YouTube at sa DepEd Tayo at DepEd Philippines social media accounts. Paalam!